Welcome to my channel. I hope today's story captures your interest and leaves you wanting more. Your continued support truly means a lot to me. Now, let's get started with the story.
On the morning of the wedding, my son sent me an email. Don't come. Pretend we don't know each other. Just watch the live stream. I stood still in the living room, my hand holding the suit I had pressed flat the night before. Molly turned toward me and asked, her voice light as air. When do we go see our son? I didn't answer. In that moment, I understood a painful contradiction. I had raised my son to become a successful man. Yet somehow, I wasn't worthy enough to be there on the most important day of his life. Before the story goes on, if you're listening and feel curious about what happens next, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. As for me, right then, I slowly sat down on the wooden chair by the window. The same spot where every morning Molly would stand and look out at the garden. That morning, the sunlight looked the same as always. Nothing hinted that something had just broken. The email was still open on the screen. I didn't read it a second time. Once was enough. The suit hung on the rack. Dark gray. Old style, but it fit. I had bought it almost 10 years ago, telling Molly I was saving it for a truly important day. She had nodded carefully, folding a light blue silk scarf and placing it on the table as if she were afraid of dropping something fragile. I helped her adjust the collar. My hands were used to precise movements, millimeter by millimeter. But that morning, everything slowed down. Molly smiled. A gentle smile. No doubt in it. We should leave early, right? She asked. I don't want to be late. I turned away, pretending to check the clock. Inside my head, those cold words echoed clearer than any sound in the room. Don't come. Pretend we don't know each other. Watch the live stream. I never imagined my son would ask that of me. Not in anger, not during an argument, but in a clean, on-time email stripped of emotion. It read like an administrative notice. And in that moment, I understood. I had just been removed from a story I helped write. I remember clearly the night Tyler told us about the wedding. He called from New York, his voice fast and excited, talking about the hotel, about names I had never heard before. Molly cried tears of joy. I stood still listening and asked only one question. Are you okay? Tyler laughed and said everything was perfect. I believed him. That morning when the email arrived, I realized that perfection had no room for us. Molly sat down in the chair across from me. She began telling the story of Tyler's first day of elementary school, a small detail she always repeated when she felt nervous. I listened, I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought about all those mornings driving him to school through Pennsylvania fog. The late dinners when I came home after Tyler was already asleep. The times I told Molly that everything would be fine as long as our son had a better chance than we did. I stood up and closed the laptop. Not because I wanted to escape, but because I needed silence. I made tea for Molly, placed the cup in front of her, and sat across from her. In that moment, I knew I had to choose. Not whether to go to New York, but how I would exist from this moment on. I didn't tell Molly about the email right away. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I didn't know how to say it. How do you explain that the son she loves is asking us to disappear? At least for one day, I looked into her eyes, saw her trust untouched, and understood that some truths need to be held back, at least for a little while. I stepped into my study. A small, neat room. Nothing but old technical books and a wooden desk. On the wall hung a photo of Tyler on his graduation day square, cap on his head, smiling with confidence. I never hung photos of my own achievements. I always believed my greatest success was him. I opened the drawer and took out the old envelope with the train tickets I had booked the week before. I stared at it for a long time, then placed it back in the drawer slowly, like closing a door. There was no burst of anger, just a hollow feeling spreading outward, clear and cold. In the living room, Molly began humming a familiar tune. She always did that while waiting. I wondered if Tyler still remembered evenings like that, or if in his new story those memories had faded, just like we had. I went back to the living room and sat beside Molly. We'll watch the wedding from home, I said, my voice calm and low. She looked at me slightly surprised, then nodded. As long as we can see him. In that moment, I realized the most painful thing wasn't being refused a seat at the wedding. It was understanding that to my son, our presence was only safe when it existed behind a screen. We sat in front of the computer screen, but the ceremony hadn't started yet. The live stream showed only a countdown. Molly watched it closely, as if afraid to miss a single second. I didn't. My eyes drifted toward the window where my reflection stared back at me, older than I expected. I never thought of myself as gray-backed. I just thought of myself as a father doing what needed to be done. But that morning, when everything was dragged into the light by a short email, old memories began finding their way back, clear and uninvited. I remembered the dark blue vintage car, an older model, but the engine was solid. I bought it after Tyler started high school, a rare reward for myself. 3 years later, when the acceptance letter from an Ivy League school arrived, I sold it within a week. I didn't tell Tyler. I only told Molly I no longer enjoyed driving. She believed me. That's when the night shifts began. I told people I liked the quiet, that it was easier to focus at night. The truth was I needed the extra hours. Tuition doesn't wait for anyone. I got used to sleeping 4 hours a day, used to the steady hum of machines and rushed meals. Tyler got used to everything being paid on time. When he graduated and moved to New York, I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong. The first call came 3 months later. Tyler spoke quickly, his voice tense, mentioning credit cards, just a few temporary expenses. I didn't ask many questions. I transferred the money. Later, I learned the amount was $45,000. I paid it off quietly over time, like a routine. Molly never knew about it. She believed her son was independent, strong. I didn't correct her. I thought that was the best way to protect her. And him. Then came the Manhattan rent. $3,500 a month, steady and predictable. I told Tyler it was a short-term loan. He didn't object. He didn't bring it up again. And once more, I didn't see it as a problem. I saw it as responsibility. That morning, sitting alone in my study, I reopened those numbers. Not to accuse, just to see them clearly. The recurring transfers filled the screen silent, precise, down to the day. I realized I had become background support in my son's life. Unnoticed, but if removed, everything would wobble. I moved the cursor and canceled each transfer. No rush, no hesitation. Each time I clicked, confirm, I paused for a beat just to be sure I was awake. I didn't feel relief. I felt necessary. After that, I called my lawyer. His voice was calm as always. I asked him to update the will, change the beneficiaries, and transfer ownership of the patents in my name into a private trust. He asked if I was sure. I said yes. No explanation needed. Those patents were never discussed in the family. Tyler knew I had been an engineer, but he didn't know what positions I held or which projects still carried my mark. I wasn't hiding anything. I just didn't talk about it. And he never asked. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time. There was no sense of victory, only an emptiness being slowly filled with clarity. For the first time in years, I knew exactly where I stood. From the living room, Molly called my name. She asked if the ceremony had started yet. I told her there were a few minutes left. She nodded and held my hand out of habit. That hand trembled slightly, almost unnoticed. I looked down and wondered how many signs I had missed, too busy chasing other things. I turned back to the screen just as the countdown disappeared. Music began to play. The image shifted to the hotel's grand hall. Everything looked bright. Perfect. Molly leaned forward, focused. I sat upright, my back against the chair like I was preparing for a test I never signed up for. One simple thought passed through my mind. Some sacrifices only matter when someone still sees them. And when no one does anymore, it's time to look back at yourself. The music grew louder, then softened. The camera swept across rows of tables draped in white cloth lights reflecting off crystal glasses so bright I had to squint. I had never stepped into a place like that. Not because I couldn't afford it, but because I never saw the need. Tyler was different. I realized that the moment he appeared on the screen, my son stood tall, shoulders open, a black suit cut perfectly to his frame. He didn't look like the boy who once hid behind my back at the old ball field. He looked like someone who had studied carefully how to stand in front of a crowd. I didn't see him searching for anything in that wide room. No glance toward the camera, as if afraid of running into something familiar. Molly leaned closer to the screen, whispering our son's name, her voice small, unsteady. I placed my hand on her shoulder, holding us both still. I didn't want her to see what was changing on my face. The ceremony unfolded smoothly, just as I expected. Prepared congratulations, smiles delivered on cue. I realized then this wasn't a ceremony for family. It was a performance, and Tyler was playing the lead. When it came time for speeches, the man I assumed was Brianna's father stepped up. He spoke slowly and clearly, with the confidence of someone used to being heard. He talked about reputation, about connections, about the future. Then, as a highlighted side note, he spoke about Tyler, the heir to a technology family raised in discipline and achievement. Molly turned to me, her eyes full of pride. I didn't look back at her. I kept my eyes on the screen. I understood that sentence perfectly. It wasn't just praise. It was part of the story Tyler had chosen. And in that story, I didn't exist as myself. I wasn't angry. Something else was rising instead. Slow, steady, a cold clarity. I realized Tyler wasn't just embarrassed by us. He had replaced us with a more convenient version. The ceremony continued. The camera moved across the guest tables. Strange faces, polite nods. Then suddenly the image settled on an older man. Gray hair, straight posture. I recognized him instantly before the thought even fully formed. Richard, my former boss. The only man who ever told me I should take more than I was given. I had smiled and refused. We hadn't seen each other in years. Richard leaned toward the person beside him and said something. The microphone didn't catch it, but I saw the shift on his face. He looked toward the stage, then toward a framed family photo nearby. A photo I knew Tyler had once sent to Molly, taken long ago. Richard stood up. No one stopped him, maybe because he didn't look like someone who should be stopped. He took the microphone, hesitated briefly, then said something that made the entire room pause. I couldn't hear every word, but I saw Tyler turn around. The smile on his face froze. Richard spoke about the past, about old projects, about a name, my name. He said my full name, clearly not a syllable wrong. Then he asked naturally, as if it were the most obvious question in the world, why that legend of the aerospace industry wasn't present today. Molly's hand loosened its grip on mine. She looked at me confused, trying to piece together scattered fragments. I took a slow, steady breath. I didn't want to frighten her, but I couldn't shield her forever. On the screen, Tyler stood still. Brianna leaned toward him and whispered something. I could see the discomfort spreading fast and visible. People around them began to murmur. The camera shook slightly, as if the operator didn't know where to point it anymore. Richard didn't stop. He spoke about how I once led entire teams, about sleepless nights, about things that can't be measured on a business card. He spoke with respect, not drama. That made it harder to hide. Tyler took the microphone and answered briefly. Too briefly. He said I wasn't well. That travel wasn't possible. I knew it was a prepared lie. But this time, it didn't carry enough weight. Molly turned to me, her voice low. How does he know you? I stayed quiet for a beat. Then I said gently, like recalling an old story. We used to work together. She nodded, but I knew she didn't fully understand yet. And maybe she didn't need to. Not right now. On the screen, the atmosphere had changed. The ceremony went on, but its rhythm was broken. Tyler was no longer at ease. He started looking around as if realizing for the first time that some things were beyond his control. I sat still, my hands resting on my knees. I did nothing. I just watched. And in that moment I understood. Once the truth slips out even a little, it can never be put back where it came from. The atmosphere on the screen was no longer smooth. I could see it clearly, even without hearing the whispers. Tyler started moving more than necessary. He adjusted his cuffs, leaned in to speak with the event coordinator, then turned to Brianna. Small movements, but I knew them. They were the signs of someone slowly losing control. Molly didn't notice right away. She kept watching closely, holding on to the familiar parts of the ceremony. I said nothing. I let things unfold on their own. There are moments when stepping in only makes everything shatter sooner than it needs to. The reception began. The lights changed color. The music grew louder, like an attempt to cover the cracks that had just appeared. I saw Tyler raise his glass, smiling at the guests. That smile was no longer seamless. It looked like a mask, slipping little by little. Then I saw Tyler signal a server and point toward the band. The camera caught the moment he signed an additional charge slip. It all happened fast, but clear enough for me to understand what was coming. A few seconds later, Tyler frowned. He looked back at the paper, then at the server. I couldn't hear the exchange, but I recognized that look. The look of someone who has just been refused and doesn't understand why. The server shook his head slightly. Polite, firm. Tyler forced a smile, then turned away and walked quickly toward Brianna's family table. Molly leaned toward me. What's going on? I placed my hand over hers, keeping my voice low. It's nothing, just a small issue. But I knew it wasn't small. It was a consequence. And it had arrived right on time. My phone vibrated in my jacket pocket. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I stood up, stepped out of the living room, and closed the door behind me. I didn't want Molly to hear this call. I answered. Tyler spoke fast without greeting me. He asked if there was a banking system error. I stayed silent for a beat. Then I spoke slowly, clearly, the way I used to explain complex technical matters. There's no error, I said. I've disconnected the secondary accounts. There was a pause on the other end. Then Tyler's voice dropped more urgent. He asked what I was doing. I told him the truth. I'm at home. I heard other sounds cutting in. Other voices. I guessed Brianna, then her father. Tyler told me to hold. I didn't hang up. I left the line open. A few seconds later, a man's voice came through. Clear. Firm. He introduced himself as Brianna's father. I greeted him politely. He asked what was going on with his son-in-law's accounts. I didn't circle around it. Since we're strangers, I said evenly, I've taken back control of what's in my name. Then I added calmly without emphasis. That includes the apartment in New York. The keys were reclaimed this morning. I heard a sharp inhale on the other end. Not from Tyler. From the man. He asked if I was joking. I told him I wasn't in the habit of doing that. The call ended without a goodbye. I stood in the hallway for a few seconds, took a deep breath, then went back into the living room. Molly looked at me, questioning. I gave a small shake of my head, as if to say, not yet. On the screen, the reception was no longer a celebration. I saw people standing up, heads bent together, in urgent exchanges. The band stopped playing. The lights lost their rhythm. Brianna stood beside Tyler, her face tight. Her parents were speaking to him, their voices no longer dressed in courtesy. Tyler turned away from the camera. But it was too late. Everything was unfolding in front of thousands of eyes, both in the room and beyond the screen. I didn't need sound to understand. I had seen projects collapse before, all because a single number was no longer backed. Molly lifted a hand to cover her mouth. She said nothing, but I could see confusion spreading through her. I placed my hand on her shoulder. You don't have to watch anymore, I said. If you're tired, we can turn it off. She shook her head. I want to understand. I nodded. I didn't explain further. Some truths once exposed don't need narration. On the screen, Tyler returned to the stage with a microphone. He said a few words, trying to keep his voice steady. But no one was really listening anymore. They were looking at each other, at Brianna's parents. And I knew that in that moment the story Tyler had built had completely lost its weight. I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt tired. Tired because everything had finally reached the point of no return. I looked at Molly. She sat still back, straight eyes fixed on the screen. I wondered what she was thinking. Maybe she was connecting pieces she had always believed were unrelated. The live stream ended abruptly. The screen went dark. The living room grew so quiet I could hear the wall clock ticking. Molly turned to me. Did it have something to do with us? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I took her hand and squeezed it gently. We've been here the whole time, I said. It's just that today, they finally noticed. She nodded slowly. No tears, no blame, just silence. I sat there in the house I knew so well and understood this much. Some masks only need a small crack to collapse completely. And when they fall, what's left isn't victory, but the bare truth everyone has to face. After the screen went dark, the house returned to its familiar shape. No stage lights, no music cut off mid-note, just the ticking wall clock and Molly's steady breathing beside me. I stood up and pulled the curtains closed. Outside, the afternoon passed calmly, as if nothing had collapsed hundreds of miles away. Molly sat still for a long time. She didn't ask anything else. She didn't cry either. That worried me more than any reaction would have. I made her a fresh cup of tea and set it on the table. She held it with both hands, gripping it tightly as if holding something more fragile than the cup itself. So, we're really not going to New York? She asked quietly. I shook my head. There's no need anymore. She nodded slowly, then looked around the living room at the old photos lined neatly on the wall. Tyler's 10th birthday, his first day of college. I realized that for the first time in a long while, she wasn't looking at them with pride, but with a gentle distance. That evening, it rained. The sound tapped steadily against the porch roof. I was washing dishes when I heard a car stop in front of the house. I didn't need to look outside to know who it was. Molly stood up out of habit, but I motioned for her to stay seated. The doorbell rang. Once, then again. I walked to the hallway and stood behind the wooden door. I didn't open it. I heard Tyler's voice on the other side. Hoarse, urgent. He called my name, then his mom's. He spoke fast without pause, as if afraid of being cut off. I didn't answer right away. I waited until he fell silent. I don't have anywhere else to go, he said. They told me to leave tonight. I leaned my back against the door. The wood felt cold. I could feel my heartbeat clearly. Not fast, not slow. I wasn't angry. I was just tired. The way you feel when a long journey finally ends. You chose your way of living, I said through the door. You chose a live stream over real life. Silence on the other side. The rain sounded heavier. I'm not opening the door, I continued, my voice calm. Not to punish you, but to let things stop here. I heard Tyler breathe hard. He said something else, but I couldn't make it out anymore. Maybe I didn't need to. I turned away and walked back to the living room. Molly looked at me. Her eyes were sad, but there was no blame in them. We did everything we could, I said. Not to convince her, but to remind myself. That night, we went to bed early. Molly held my hand as she slept like she always had. Her hand was warm. I thought about all the years behind us, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to fix anything else. A few weeks later, we left Pennsylvania. Quietly. No announcements. I sold the house to a young family. They said they loved the garden. I smiled, knowing how patiently Molly had cared for it. We started the trip I had postponed for too long. No packed schedule. Just slow trains, small towns, morning coffee by hotel windows. Molly often forgot the names of places, but she remembered the feeling. She smiled more. I learned how to slow down with her. Sometimes sitting on a park bench, I thought about Tyler, not with anger, but with a quiet emptiness. I understood that some children have to collide with life to grow, and some lessons can't be handed over gently. One afternoon, Molly asked me, "Do you regret it?" I thought for a long time. Then I shook my head. "No," I said. "I just wish I had lived for myself sooner." She nodded and leaned against my shoulder. We sat there watching the sun set. No stage, no audience. Just two old people finally allowing themselves a place to stand. I learned something late, but clearly. Never shrink yourself to fit into a story that doesn't include your name. Respect isn't a reward. It's the minimum. And if someone won't give you a seat at their table, then maybe it's time to build a different space of your own. No noise. No proving anything. Just enough peace to know that at the end of the road, Molly and I still have each other. And that is enough. This is where my story ends. Thank you for listening with patience and understanding. If this story made you think or touched something from your own life, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with anyone who might need to hear it. Every subscription and share helps real stories like this continue to be told. Thank you for being here, for walking alongside me, and I'll see you again in the next story.